The WNBA just greenlit a strike vote and it passed with a staggering 98%. And honestly, the timing couldn't be more disastrous. At the exact moment when Caitlin Clark is publicly calling for unity and urging everyone to protect the league's momentum, longtime voices within the league are doing the opposite, mocking new fans, rejecting growth, and treating expansion like a threat instead of an opportunity. I'm not sugarcoating this anymore. Enough is enough.
WNBPA has got full power on calling a strike. Authorization from the WNBA players. WNBPA statement regarding strike authorization vote. They had a vote, all right? The players had a vote, and they said basically that the WNBPA can literally call a strike whenever they feel it's necessary.
What we're witnessing in women's basketball right now isn't simple controversy. It's self-inflicted damage, and I'm about to break down exactly who's strangling the golden goose while claiming they're protecting it. So let's set the scene. It's December 2025. The WNBA is coming off the most successful season in its history. Viewership shattered records. Arenas were packed night after night. Sponsors were lining up with checkbooks wide open. Team USA camp just ended on a high note, full of optimism and buzz. Caitlin Clark, Paige Buchers, Angel Reese, sharing the floor, thriving together, putting the league's future on full display. Everything was finally clicking. The momentum was real. The outlook was undeniable. And then, out of nowhere, a podcast clip detonates online. Not because it offered meaningful insight, not because it pushed the game forward, but because it openly talked down to the very wave of new fans who helped fuel this historic surge. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, joined by Katie Nolan, sat down to discuss the league's growing pains. Fair enough, that conversation matters, but here's where things went sideways. They made a deliberate choice. They isolated the most dismissive, most provocative portion of that discussion and blasted it onto social media to promote the show. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a quote stripped of context. That clip was the context. They wanted outrage. They wanted it to spread, and they knew exactly what they were doing.
I don't know why we're still bringing up a toxic fan base. I thought it was so condescending to say that so many fans are just latching on to Caitlin Clark for reasons other than the basketball, and that is something that we just continue to see. And it was also crazy because Katie Nolan at the end of this whole bit, she was like, yeah, I don't really watch that many games, but I'm keeping tabs on it. And it's like, that's the reason you had the take that you did. The reason that you had the take that you did is because you're not watching the games. You're not watching what's going on. You're not going to the games. And you clearly said that. You said, I'm a casual fan. I don't really watch the games, but I keep tabs on what's going on.
So what was the message they pushed? That the surge of new WNBA fans isn't about the sport at all. That people are only tuning in for Caitlin Clark for reasons supposedly unrelated to basketball. They painted these fans as toxic, as if their first instinct is to tear down every player who came before her. And here's the part that really seals it. Katie Nolan openly acknowledged on camera that she doesn't even watch the games. By her own admission, she's a casual observer who just follows headlines and chatter from a distance.
So to single out, once again, like I said, in 2025, to target a group of fans felt like was very condescending. There was another point in the podcast where Sue Bird said that all of these new fans that came here, they immediately said that all of the players who came before Caitlin were trash, and that's just not true.
Think about how absurd that is. A person who doesn't even follow women's basketball is now policing fandom, telling diehards who set alarms at 2 in the morning in Germany just to watch Indiana Fever games that they somehow don't count. Someone who struggles to name half the league's starters is scolding the very audience that helped explode attendance by 300%, as if their passion is somehow invalid or misplaced.
I also feel so bad for Caitlin Clark because she's gotten to the level of popularity where people have just dehumanized her.
The nerve of it all is staggering. And somehow it keeps getting worse because there's a massive detail almost no one wants to confront. The WNBA Players Association has now granted its executive committee unrestricted authority to call a strike at any moment. Let that register. 93% of players took part in the vote. 98% approved it. Just 2% dissented. And I'd put real money on Caitlin Clark being part of that minority. Why? Because she's the only one saying the obvious part out loud. The league has to play next season. The momentum can't be interrupted uninterrupted. Progress requires compromise. Both sides have to give a little. That's how real negotiations work. You don't walk away with everything, but you walk away with enough to keep the train moving. Somehow that level of reason is now controversial. Instead, sweeping strike power has been handed to a union that has been reckless online for months, and that's being charitable. The WNBPA's social presence hasn't been bold or strategic. It's been chaotic, combative, and needlessly divisive. And now that same energy has access to the nuclear button, the ability to halt an entire season on a whim. Do people really understand what that means? This is happening at the exact moment the league finally has a foothold in the mainstream. Casual fans are tuning in. Corporate money is flowing. Eyes are finally staying on women's basketball. And right now, the power exists to torch all of it instantly. Are the players right to want better pay? Of course. Improved travel? Absolutely. Stronger marketing support? Long overdue. But here's the part no one wants to admit. None of that survives a shutdown. No games means no viewers. No viewers means no revenue. And no revenue means no future to negotiate over. Now for the uncomfortable reality WNBA media refuses to say plainly. The loudest critics of new fans are often the same people who weren't watching when the audience was small. The analysts complaining that Caitlin Clark dominates coverage suddenly disappear when she's not in the headline. The podcasters acting like cultural gatekeepers rarely sit through full games themselves. Elle Duncan said the quiet part out loud, claiming Caitlin Clark's fan base drains the fun from the league, that before all these new viewers arrived, there was more variety, more freedom in coverage. And my response is simple: then cover it. No one is stopping you. If you want to break down A'ja Wilson's MVP level dominance, do it. If Breanna Stewart is taking over games, spotlight it. If Sabrina Ionescu deserves praise, give it loudly. But here's the truth they all know: those segments don't move numbers. Those posts don't travel. They don't spark debate or explode on timelines. Caitlin Clark does, so they lean on her name, her highlights, her presence. And when that strategy works too well, they turn around and blame the fans for responding. That's not logic, that's resentment. You built platforms off her visibility, you benefited from the clicks she generated, and now you're angry that the audience followed. That's the most backward feedback loop imaginable. Take a specific example, a thoughtful article about A'ja Wilson, well written, well deserved, and buried inside it, a completely unnecessary jab at Caitlin Clark from the same writer who praised her extensively the year before. Ask yourself why that line was there. What did it contribute? How did diminishing one player elevate another? It didn't, but it did one thing perfectly. It drove engagement, it provoked arguments, it pulled clicks, and that's the incentive structure now. Caitlin Clark has been reduced to a content engine, not a human being, not a 23-year-old navigating injuries, relentless pressure, and real safety concerns. Just a tool for traffic, a character instead of a person, and that's the part no one wants to own. At this point, her name has become a plug-and-play headline, something you drop into any story when the numbers need a boost. And somehow she carries it all with more composure than anyone should ever be asked to. She shows up every night, she competes, she absorbs the pressure, the noise, the chaos, and in return, she's rewarded with yet another round of commentary dissecting the intentions of her fans. But this is where the situation really starts to spiral. The Indiana Fever just unveiled their 2026 team calendar, and Caitlin Clark is nowhere to be found. Not highlighted, not referenced, completely absent. Predictably, fans exploded, demanding to know how the biggest star the franchise has ever had could be left off something so basic. To be fair, I don't believe this was a deliberate slight. The most likely explanation is something mundane. Image rights, a marketing agreement that didn't clear, a personal decision, a contract detail behind the scenes. There are plenty of reasonable possibilities, but the fact that people instantly jump to the worst conclusion says everything about the current state of the conversation. Fans have been conditioned to expect disrespect, so much so that even a team calendar turns into a perceived attack. That's not normal, it's not healthy, and it definitely can't last. Because here's what comes next. That strike authorization doesn't disappear, it just sits there, waiting. Talks stall, frustration builds, and eventually someone on that executive committee decides to pull the trigger. The season gets postponed, or wiped out entirely, and all the progress that took years to build vanishes overnight. overnight. The casual fans who were just starting to care, gone. The sponsors who were finally investing real money, they walk immediately. The mainstream media attention that women's basketball fought for reduced back to niche coverage and hardcore circles. Everything snaps back to 2023, or worse. And the cruel irony is this: the biggest losers won't be the loudest voices, it'll be the players who were ready to compete, the rookies on the verge of breaking out, the role players who finally had eyes on them. Their moment disappears, not because of failure, but because opportunity was squandered. Let me be absolutely clear: player leverage matters, fair pay matters, improved conditions matter. This isn't anti-union and it's not anti-player, but it is anti-reckless decision making. Granting strike power at this exact moment, when momentum is fragile and growth is real, is careless. And you know what else makes no sense? Waging war on your own audience, turning podcasts into fan-shaming factories, writing hit pieces that take subtle shots at the player responsible for packed arenas and record ratings. None of it adds up. The most frustrating part? Everyone involved knows better. They understand the damage, they see the risk, but they keep doing it anyway, because outrage travels faster than optimism, because controversy performs, and because tearing someone down is easier than actually building something worth protecting. So here's my challenge to WNBA media, the analysts, the podcasters, the reporters who swear they care about this sport. Prove it. Show that you can generate interest by actually talking about basketball without dropping Caitlin Clark's name every few sentences. Show that you're capable of elevating other players without dragging anyone else through the mud. Show that you're watching the games you claim to defend so passionately, because right now I'm not buying it. From where I'm sitting, too many of you look like visitors in your own league. Women's basketball has become a backdrop for hot takes, culture wars, and personal branding, not the focus. And instead of helping the game grow, you're weighing it down, because the tide is turning. Audiences are exhausted by bad faith arguments. They're tired of being lectured about how they're supposed to watch. They're tired of analysts who don't analyze and experts who clearly aren't tuning in. What people actually want is substance, film breakdowns, strategy, player growth, real stories that deepen their understanding of the game. And if established media can't deliver that, someone else will. That's how this works. Audiences migrate, and right now they're finding what they want outside the traditional WNBA media bubble. Which brings us to the moment we're in. Strike authorization is locked and loaded. Podcast fallout is still rippling. The positivity from Team USA training camp has already vanished from the conversation, and instead of focusing on basketball, everyone's arguing about everything but the game. Now add more chaos to the pile. Iowa just suspended Emily Rodriguez indefinitely for violating team rules. Not an injury, not an illness, but disciplinary action. She's not even traveling with the team to New York for the game against UConn. According to reports, she can return if she recommits to team standards, whatever that ends up meaning. So now we've got suspension drama, labor drama, media drama, calendar drama, everything happening all at once. It's almost like the WNBA looked at the most successful year in its history and said, let's light a match. And that's why this matters. The league is standing at a fork in the road. One direction leads to long-term growth, mainstream stability, and generational wealth for players. The other leads right back to the margins. And right now, the people with the most influence are sprinting toward that second option, while shouting at fans for following along. Here's the irony. Caitlin Clark is 23 years old, and she understands this moment better than veterans twice her age. Play the season, find middle ground, keep the momentum alive. This isn't radical thinking. It's not groundbreaking. It's basic logic. But logic doesn't trend. Outrage does. We've built a media ecosystem that rewards conflict over clarity, division over direction, and punishes anyone who tries to take the reasonable path. Until that changes, we'll keep recycling the same arguments. Who deserves credit? Who counts as a real fan? Whether growth is good or bad, while the actual game gets buried under the noise. So here's the ask: do better. Players, do better. Media, do better. Fans, do better. Everyone needs to step back and ask a hard question. Is what you're doing helping women's basketball or just helping you? Because if a strike happens, if a season gets wiped out, if all this momentum collapses, you can't pin that on Caitlin Clark. You can't blame new fans. The responsibility will sit squarely with the people who chose chaos over progress. And history won't be gentle with that decision. The clock is running. Figure it out.